Resuming debate.
Resuming debate.
Resuming debate. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Resuming Debate podcast. I'm your host, Member of Parliament Garnet Jennis. It's a real pleasure to be with you for this new episode and to bring you the voice, the story of someone that I've had the pleasure of working with for a number of years now on a very important global situation. That's the situation in Burma. So very pleased to welcome a spokesman for the NUG, Zaw Kyaw. Zaw, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you, Garnet. I'm honored to be here.
So just by way of kind of introduction to this topic and why this is important, Burma's very far away from Canada, and yet we're in the middle of this kind of escalating global conflict between authoritarian and democratic systems. And we've talked often on my podcast and on other platforms that I have just about how this is part of an integrated global struggle, and what happens in other places has an impact on us. It has an impact on global security. And Burma really is one of these flashpoints in this struggle between authoritarianism and democracy. I wonder if you can just bring people up to speed who are not really as familiar with Burma, what is happening and why is it important to them if they live in Canada or elsewhere in the world?
Yeah, thank you, Garnet. I just want to start briefly mention about why Burma is strategically located. And the Burma is the second largest country in Southeast Asia after Indonesia. And then we are situated between two the major countries, the China and India, and the east of us it's northeast in China, and then west and northwest with India, and then western with one of the world most populated countries, Bangladesh, and then also in the southern part that we have a border with Thailand, and then we have southern part that we have that India Ocean, so that we are strategically located in Southeast Asia, and then we have the 56 million people live in Burma, and then but we are a very diverse country with over 130 different ethnic nationalities living in Burma, and Burma is the largest ethnic in country, which has dominated about 70% of the total population. And the western part of the country, and many people know that the crisis or Rohingya crisis, and the Rohingya people in the Arakan states are the bordering with Bangladesh. So, and then in Rohingyas, one of the minorities in Burma, and then oppressed people, and then actually in Burma, and the ethnic minorities being oppressed since 1962. Burma used to be the briefly the parliament democracy country since we gained that independence from British in 1948, and about a military station coup in 1962. Since then, Burma we live under the successive military regime until now, and then we've been oppressed for over 70 years, and then in modern history, and then many people know that Rohingya people be wiped out from their homes and their villages, and force them to move out from the country. So that's the military regime, successive military regime practices across the country. For example, in southern part of our country, Karen ethnic, those are the majority are Christian, and that they've been living, I think, over millions of people in Thailand. In Thailand, for example, we have undocumented people from Burma. Over 5 million population live in Thailand. The mostly initially with the Karen, Shan, and also even Burma now. So now we have a brief semi-democratization period for about several years, when the 2015 multi-party elections held because of the international pressure. The Aung San Suu Kyi led party won majority, and then but that election was held under the 2008 constitutions, which is drafted by the military. So, for example, they have total control over the country. For example, 25% of MPs directly appointed by the military in the parliament. And then Ministry of Defense, Interior Ministry, Border Security Ministry, those are directly appointed by the military chief, and they don't answer to the country president. So that's why when it happened, the Rohingya crisis happened, the clearance operations happened, and the military 100% they did that without the civilian oversight, all civilian control. If the civilian so-called civilian government even didn't aware of this. So and then 2020 elections, but that time the economy quite growth, foreign investments came in, and then by 2020 elections, another majority landslides won by the pro-democracy, the political party, and then military staged a coup in 2021 February 1st before the new government uh, new parliament can take the seats. So the almost all the parliamentarians and MPs were detained in the capital Naypyidaw, and then but they were luckily that they were able to convene the parliament with the majority attendance on Zoom parliament, and that they formed a committee representing the Pidawsu, no, that's mean the parliament. So, anyway, long story short, and the whole countries revolved protest against a military coup, and then I'm saying the whole country, means literally the whole country, led by the Generation Z, the youth, and then the peaceful protests, and the military killed the brutally killed the people on the streets, and brutalized, and so the people took up the arms against that the military, the defense themselves. So our government, national unity government, was found established by the parliament, elected MPs representing the committee, and then we assume that the legitimacy of the country, and then we are fighting against that total authoritarian regime and supported by other authoritarian states. So that's nutshell of the country situations. And then our countries right now is that the whole country is united against. I just mentioned about the over 130 ethnic nationalities. We all united, including Rohingya, and we all united against the military dictatorship, and then we staging the resistance war against the military regime. Now, our resistance forces and then our the ethnic armed organizations, we control over 60% of the territories, and then but the military since the coup just over 3 years ago, the military killed the civilians, over 6,000 civilians, and then 28,000 people being arbitrarily detained, and then over I think over 2,000 people were killed under their detention, and then right now they continue their brutality. The station does airstrikes against the targeted civilians, and then the churches, mosques, monasteries, even hospitals, even the schools and the school children that they've been they're killing those civilians from the skies, and that since they're losing the grounds, and that they're using the air powers against the civilians, so that the whole country is being brutalized by this authoritarian military regime.
Yeah, thank you for that. So that was, I think, a very good summary. So essentially, which you've laid out for our viewers and listeners is two dimensions of conflict, right? Broadly speaking, you've got Burma that is majority ethnic Burmese and Buddhist, and you've got many other different ethnic and religious minorities in the country as well. And then you have the military regime, and then you have the democracy movement. So historically in the country, there's been conflict between the military regime and the democracy movement, and there's also been conflict between the majority. Generally, it's been the military regime again acting against the minorities who have, in many cases, who have their own militias that seek to provide some degree of defense for their communities. So, you talked about the phase of military, the military regime that took over shortly after independence. Then you have this kind of interregnum of power sharing, and then after that, you had the coup that followed, and this has led the democracy movement to, I think, see that there is that compromising with the military regime is not going to be fruitful, and therefore you have increasing collaboration between the democracy movement and ethnic minority communities working together to bring about a pluralistic democracy in Burma. So I think that was a good summary. And I wonder if you can. I want to talk kind of mainly about present events, but I wonder if you can drill a bit more for us into this kind of experiment of power sharing. Obviously, very, very difficult situation. You're trying to move towards democracy, and the military seems like they're ready to make concessions. So you're able to have the start of partial democracy, but you have a situation in which, for one thing, the military still exercises a stranglehold on power, and two, you have the military committing all kinds of atrocities, and such as the Rohingya genocide that you talked about. It was the military that was doing it, but at the same time, in the midst of a power sharing agreement with civilian authorities, there were, I think, a lot of people internationally that this obviously affected their view of the civilian democratic leadership as well, wanting to see them do more. But this was a challenging time, obviously, and it seems now that looking back, people in the democracy movement are saying we need total victory for democracy if we're going to move forward. Curious for your thoughts on kind of the evaluation of that period and how that's influenced the thinking today.
Yes, Garnet, you summarized quite well. And then during the brief democratization period or quasi-civilian the rule, and then we thought that there would be a peaceful solution, and then there would be national reconciliation, and that does mean that the whole country would be reunited and reconciled, and including military. They are also the part of our citizens, but like you said, they have almost total control over the security. No, or not almost 100% total control over security affairs. That means not only military but also police, and also in legislature they have 25% of MPs directly appointed by the military chief, and according to their military constitution, in order to make any amendment in the constitution, there's a requirement of 75%. So that's mean automatically they have veto power 25%. So even then, we have that the fruit of we have tasted the fruit of democracy, and that brief periods, and especially the younger people, they have some sort of the freedom to learn, especially to learn their eyes wide open, and then when they stage a coup, and then the people know that that's our rights, fundamental rights that we use, and they voted, and then they use their guns and the force to try to grab the power, so that people revolted, and then also that, as I mentioned, that they brutally cracked down on the peaceful demonstrations, and the Burmese military is Burma is a majority. They mainly live in the central Burma, and then yes, Burmese armies is dominated by Burma ethnic. So now even the Burma ethnic, they protested and they pick up the arm whatever we can. So so that's why the whole country is united. We are united as ever, the most united time of our country's history. And then so that we have the people take up the arms like we call People Defense Forces. Our government, NUG, National Unity Government, the we try to organize under our Ministry of Defense those PDF forces under the one chain of command, and we have the numbers of ethnic armed organizations that we coordinated and collaborated together, and this way that we can ensure we those are our revolutionary forces, resistance forces, follow the military code of conduct, Geneva Convention, and then the the difference between the military, Burmese military, is that they rape, they steal, and then they rob the people, and then they kill the people. So, but our forces are disciplined and follow the human rights, and also the Geneva Convention. And now also our country is very divisive because they use a division as a strength. That we are for uniting the population and then diverse communities. We are using the diversity as a strength to build an democracy pluralism, and we are the aiming. We are our goal is to establish the peaceful federal democratic union that guarantee equality, the self-determination, and human rights for all, and that also has to has to follow the transitional justice for those atrocities. Those perpetrators has to be accountable. So in the current situations, like you mentioned, that now that we are united as ever, and that we fighting together against the military junta, and that this is a time that we're not fighting for the regime change, we are fighting for the system change. That means that there will be no place for the authoritarian another regime in our country. There has to be federal democratic union, similar to the one in Canada. In Canada, we have a profit provision systems. We have resource sharing, and the people and different people living in harmony. And so now we are more diverse, and that we be using this federalism that guarantee for everybody life, and then including that citizenship. And under the military regime, 1982 citizenship law discriminate against ethnic nationalities, especially to Rohingya ethnics. And then not only Rohingya ethnics, many of the ethnic minorities are stateless. As I mentioned, in Thailand alone, minimum 5 million people. And in Malaysia, again, significant number. And in India also. So prior to the coup over 3.5 years ago, our country has a IDP just over 300,000 internally displaced people. Now, over 3.5 years later, after the coup, we have 4 million internally displaced people. On top of that, 19 million populations require the humanitarian assistance. This is what the UN OCHA numbers. Actual number would be higher. That means over half of the populations require humanitarian assistance. That means that we this is the unprecedented humanitarian crisis in our history, and then also that I would say that the wars uh, in Southeast Asia after the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia. So that's
Yeah.
what the situation is very dire, and the peoples are being killed by military every day. So
Mhm. Yeah. That's it's a very sobering reality. Um, at the NUG, uh, one of the things I've seen just talking to people that are resisting authoritarian powers is that the ability to bring people together around an opposition agenda is really important, and it can also be really challenging. You've got people who oppose an existing regime who maybe have very definitive and distinct ideas about what that post-regime future should look like. So getting people together across different dimensions of experience and ideas and building up institutions and capacity around a common agenda. It's challenging. I think it's particularly challenging in Burma. But you've undertaken this work at the NUG, recognizing the importance of uniting the different ethnic groups as well as the pro-democracy movement, and building on the history and the institutions in different communities. That's really a Herculean task, and I wonder if you could share a little bit with people about how the progress is going on that, where the challenges are when you've got, for instance, different ethnic militias that are oriented towards fighting for their own communities, but then putting everybody together with a common vision for the future of the country.
Yes, that's very challenging. Our government, National Unity Government, was established in April 16, 2021, by the committee representing the parliamentarians. And then based on that election, 2020 November elections, that are internationally accepted as a totally free and fair election, that elected the pro-democracy parties, mainly National League for Democracy, won landslide in the parliament, and then over 80% of almost 90% of the seats won by NLD. And even then, as the National Unity Government, yes, of course, our governments of including the election winning parties, MPs in our government, even though they won 80-90% of the election, in our government, the NLD representatives are less than 50%. So over 50% of the cabinet members are from the different walk of lives, different ethnic groups, and the different the representatives, so that we try to have a more coalition type of government in place representing the whole countries, regardless of religions and ethnic backgrounds and belief. So I'm proudly want to mention that we have the first Rohingya ethnic cabinet members in our national unity government. He is not only the Rohingya ethnic, but also the first the cabinet members from Muslims community in Burma since 1962. This is a historic. And then also that I initially I mentioned about our countries has over 70% of the population are Burma ethnic nationalities. In our government and the Burma ethnics are less than 50%. So that so that we try to accommodate, we accommodate in the ethnic minorities to represent the more ethnic minorities. We want to build that inclusive government. Yes, we are most inclusive government in Burma history, but not the fully inclusive. We are striving to do that. But first of all, we have to win this revolution or resistance war against the military junta, authoritarian regime, and then we have to build that the Federal Democratic Union. We call it the transition phase. Now it's an interim phase. And, oh, by the way, in March 2021, now we agree on the Federal Democracy Charter approved by different groups, including the elected parliamentarians, ethnic nationalities, civil society organization, and then the political parties, and then the women groups. We all agree on the Federal Democracy Charter that will build to the Federal Democratic Union. So that's how that we work in. And then also, like you mentioned, a lot of different groups that are so. I would like to point it out that joint position statements between NUG and the resistance forces on January 31st, 2024 this year. And then we have the common position, politically common position, that we established that our objectives, the most important thing is that the military has to be under the elected civilian regime. Military has to be uh, out from uh, the politics forever, and then also the releasing of ending the violence, releasing all the political prisoners, and the transactional justice. So about total six the objectives that we mentioned, and that we not close the door for the dialogue. What we want the genuine dialogue, the based on those principles, and then that would happen if the whatever in the military current military agree to do that, then that would be the peaceful power transfer could be happen. But at this
Yeah.
time, that all ethnic nationalities and the armed forces, and then you mentioned about the local militia, and then they may not be necessarily under our Ministry of Defense chain of command, but we working together with them militarily, and then we also try to educate them on military code of conduct, and then also IHL, international humanitarian law, this way that people we try to align ourselves among the resistant forces, and then hopefully one day all of us will be one under the chain of command, and then after that we have to do the security sector reform as well.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've got these plans. You're in this sort of transitional. There's a civil war ongoing, and also in this transitional phase. The military regime still controls the capital. You have not controlled by the military, though, most of the country's territory. In effect, 60% of the country's territory. It sounds from what you're describing like you don't have sort of a command and control relationship with all those who are fighting against the regime. You have more of that coordinating role where you as the NUG are able to work with and coordinate with everybody, and that's part hopefully of a process of establishing more trust and building up more coordination over time. Is that right? It's sort of more of a coordinating than a command and control.
It's right, and it is right, but it's not completely correct. Yes, so we have that command and control. One command control. We have three military region in our country. Number one, number two, and number three. So that each military regions, we have the chief of staff, and then that under that military region, and then not necessarily under the NUG government, but also the ethnic armed organizations. So we do have the operate together joint operations under the military region command, and that's a military lead. But on that's the majority of the armed resistance movement. But besides that, there's some local the defense forces outside of the military region. So those most of those, yes, like you mentioned, not necessarily under that military region command, but coordinate and cooperate together in the military operations. And that but those are the ones that we are trying to have together under the chain of command. And so yes, each armed organization, they have their own independent, but they work under the one chain of command by the different military region. Politically, we do work together, and then we have political agreements and arrangements. And then, like you mentioned, that we are working towards transition and that arrangement together. We working together on the transitional constitution, and then also that first we were able to release a joint position, political position statement on January 31st. That's a political position. And then in September, there are the joint statements among the 9 different ethnic organizations on the bottom of federalism. So those are the one that we our in our country federalism is in action. Like you mentioned, over 60% of territories are under the resistance forces. Now, since we have a more and more liberated area, and we have to provide the public services, we have interim government institutions, and we coordinate, and then like in Canada, and the ethnic states, for example, in Granny states, they have an interim executive council. That's an interim state government, and then they handling their state affairs, and then but we coordinating with NUG on that governmental services, providing the public services. So we are coordinating on federalism is in action, and then and we have in our country we have 330 townships. Out of that, the 90 towns and cities are totally controlled by our resistance forces across the country. And then most of the rural areas are controlled by the resistance forces. And so our challenge is not only fighting against a military authoritarian junta, but also at the same time also trying to provide the public services to the population. And the biggest challenge is that providing the humanitarian assistance to those people who in needs. And then our revolution, organic revolution, with a very little support from the international community. That's from help from the support from the people to people. Yes, we do appreciate that our friendly nations, democratic nations like Canada, United States, EU, and UK, putting pressure on that military junta, and then also the providing the humanitarian assistance, but it's not enough. And then also the putting pressure means sanctions, but sanctions are good, but it still have many rooms to improve. So again, I just want to mention that there's an organic revolution, and the people to people, and the people support this revolution is succeeding. And the military, in Burmese military history, this is the time that they are losing ground to the resistance forces, and that even their major regional headquarters being captured by the resistance forces in northern Shan State, and then also a couple of regional headquarters are now threatened and by the resistance forces. One of them is about to fall to the resistance forces.
Mm-hmm. I want to pick up on a few of the things you said with some comments, and then would love your feedback on them. So, just at the beginning of that response, you're talking about kind of the political and military work that's going on simultaneously, right? You're fighting this civil war, but there's also this constant political work that's going on as well, and that makes it a very intense and dynamic situation. Obviously, you've got to think about how to spend time, allocate resources between those things. In terms of the humanitarian needs, as you know, Zaw, we've been advocating in Canada for the government to deliver the assistance that they provide to Burma through the opposition-controlled areas, and it seems like a no-brainer, right? That we should be when we're delivering humanitarian assistance, we should be doing it through and in partnership with the pro-democracy, pro-freedom resistance, and not through the junta-controlled capital. And then on the sanction side, we've done some advocacy around oil and gas sanctions in particular, because it seems like the same story everywhere. When you have you've got these bad actors around the world that are able to rely on natural resource exports. Meanwhile, in Canada, we're, from my perspective, not doing enough to develop our own resources to displace some of these the sources from these bad actors. And Canada has actually been behind the United States even in terms of imposing sanctions on the state control, I should say the military junta controlled oil and gas development in Burma. So if you want to pick up on any of those points, humanitarian assistance, oil and gas sanctions, or this balance between political and military work.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, and it's heartbreaking to see the human sufferings. Um, is 19 million people needs day-to-day humanitarian assistance. Over 4 million people has no shelter and that they became internally displaced people. And more another millions of people they fled the country and are living in the neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Thailand, and India. And this is heartbreaking. And I would say that we have 56 million people in Burma, but almost half of them, or over half of them, are either living in desperate situations inside country or outside of the country. The humanitarian assistance is very much needed. Um, the refugees outside of the country, and then also the people inside of the country. That I said again that 90 million plus 4 million internally displaced people. Yes, you are correct. And I first of all I want to thank and appreciate members of parliament, parliamentarians who are advocating, including you, your leadership, to support the humanitarian assistance and civilian protection again from the military regime. There's a no brainer, and there should be more cross border assistance to the most of those IDPs, internally displaced people, are living in resistance control area, not under the military control area. So why not coordinating with the pro-democracy movements and then resistance forces or authorities in interim authorities coordinate and then working with the local humanitarian NGOs and humanitarian organizations providing to directly to the people in need. So that means that we are using Canadian taxpayer money, and that those are with the most effectively reaching out to the most vulnerable people. Um, I I do understand that the government of Canada also have a concern about that the more bureaucratically required reporting requirement, so on and so forth, more transparencies. But I think we can overcome those challenges by uh, training the capacity, putting the capacity building to those organizations on the ground on the requirements, teaching them so that they can work on the more transparent and more organized, more reporting compliance way of doing that. So hopefully that Canada and the international community will be doing the, I call it the innovative way or non-traditional way of providing the humanitarian assistance. If you go through the traditional way like a UN, and the UN always go through that the capital who controlled by the military, and then in turns there will be just a photo ops, and then for the because military hunters using the humanitarian assistance as a weapon, like they using the rape as a weapon. So so this
Yeah.
way that we could have more. We are also advocating not only in Canada but also in United States as well for those our friendly nations to use that non-traditional, more innovative way to direct assistance to the people in needs on the ground. And then also back to the pressure or to the military regime. And yes, sanctions are good. Sanctions are, um, not the 100% perfect, not because of the sanction regime will not fall, but sanction will help regime fall faster. So, and then as long as the military junta is in the power, and they to kill the people, human sufferings will be humanitarian uh, crisis will be worse and worse. I mentioned about over 3 years ago, 300,000 IDPs, now 4 million IDPs just over 3 years ago. So that's because of the military atrocities and violence against civilian. Civilian protection is a key, and so the oil and gas is a key sector of the military income, and then the West, the democratic country must because those oil and gas sectors revenue went to the military to buy the weapons and the ammunition to kill the people. So why that no brainer? Why not stopping the revenue flow to the military junta? But at the same time also why not helping that democratic movement to protect the civilians? And then, for example, the communication systems, early warning system. from the airstrikes. Now they are using the sophisticated drones provided by Russia and China. So they kill those drone kill civilian target civilians. So why those are non-lethal assistance that Canada and the West can provide, like simple as a early warning system to protect the civilians, and then also the communication, because all the communication cut off, no internet access. So those are the things that Canada and the US and the EU and UK, those friendly nations can do that, also in coordination with regional countries as well.
Mhm. So it seems for a lot of these issues you raise, maybe there is a bit of a connection to the issue of recognition of the NUG, because these forms of support can be provided in irregular ways. But one of the problems, and look, one of the things that I've critiqued about the UN system is that it does, by its nature, end up being overly reliant on states, on
Mhm.
collaboration with states, on delivering assistance through states. And maybe that wouldn't be a problem in the case of Burma if we recognize the legitimate representative of the state being the NUG. But that's not the situation right now. You don't hold Burma's seat at the United Nations or in various international organizations. So what do you think about this recognition issue? Is that something you are seeking to move forward with? I mean, you control most of the country's territory. You express the aspirations of the people of the country, and you're working to build broader and broader coalitions. So how important is recognition, and what is happening in that regard?
It's very important. If the free world wants to help the people of Burma, as you mentioned, now once legally recognized, you can do more, provide them more assistance, the state to state assistance. Now that the regime is losing the grounds, they have no legitimacy, and the UN system has to use a state's authority. So that definition mostly because of those people control the capital, so that they are dealing with the military junta. But our government has a legitimacy from the people who voted in the 2020 election, free and fair elections, and we have all representatives. We have de facto and de jure government. And then the simple as is that on that the Canada and West engaging with us, we have more and more engagement with the free world, and then more and more countries. But we need recognition that this way that those traditional way of providing the humanitarians will also be effectively able to provide. So most of the donor countries using the UN system, the UN system, like you mentioned, that based on that people state. The state may based on that whoever in the capital city. So and that's a waste in the taxpayer money, and that also in UN. But actually, the regime also military junta doesn't have a representative in the UN in New York. And in New York, the Burma has a permanent representative appointed by the previous NLD government. Once a coup, and then the UN Credential Committee deferred the decision. And the current ambassador in the UN, he denounced that the military coup against a civilian government, and then he the support national unity government. But in UN, because of the UN Credential Committee defer the decision, and then so this way that he's still the representing Burma as a country, but he's because of the deferral of the decision, the UN still hasn't recognized who he worked for. That's been national unity government, but definitely there's no military representative in UN system. So why
Yeah.
UN directly UN has to go through the military junta? Or why not UN and other countries that work with us, and then with the people who actually control the territories and deliver the stream? But I'm not saying about the people, civilians under the military control shouldn't get. I'm not saying they shouldn't get the assistance. They also should get the assistance. They also suffering from the military regime. so that this has to be equally important to provide the assistance to the people in either controlled by resistance forces or controlled by military junta.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the ambassador in New York, because it's one of these quirks of the international system I've realized is, and you have this with Afghanistan as well, that after the Taliban takeover,
Yes.
you had kind of a network of Afghan ambassadors who were opposed to the Taliban, who are opposed to the Taliban, who sort of represent the previous government, and who are trying to continue to do their work. Even though the government that they represented has sadly lost out. It's interesting to see sort of similar dynamics happening around here. But the other thing about recognition, and we've talked about this before, I wonder if you could just mention how this works. But international recognition of the NUG would unlock assets that are the Burmese government's property, that you would be able to make use of if you were internationally recognized as that government. So it's not just the kind of symbolic or political recognition, but it actually unlocks material resources, and it allows you to really strengthen your position.
Yeah, got it. You pointed 100% correct. And for example, in United States government freeze that Burma assets right after the coup.
Yeah.
We estimate about over 1.3, 1.4 billion dollars. And so even if they don't want to unfreeze all of them, even that the portion of that, whatever the interest earned, and to use in the humanitarian assistance, for let us to use that money, and we help the alleviate the human pains. And then they've been using this in the Ukraine, and they also use it in the Afghanistan as well. So that there has to be way to help the people of Burma direct the assistance from the Canada or US and the West, and then using the taxpayer money on top. But if the Burmese people own money can be utilized, and then that would be more effective, right? So
Yeah.
so that this is again, people would think that no brainer, but that's also the challenge that we are facing. And then
Yeah.
the unnecessarily, a lot of people are dying.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, and I think the connection you made with Russia and Ukraine, that we have a legal framework that allows the repurposing of frozen Russian assets, but I mean, I think a lot more could be done, and it would make sense to Canadian taxpayers and to people suffering around the world that we would seek to use the assets that are frozen or would otherwise be under the control of despots and dictators to be able to support their victims, whichever context we're talking about. Zaw, thanks for your time. I got a couple more questions. We'll try to squeeze just a couple more things in before we wrap up. And thank you again for doing this. You talked about the Federal Democracy Charter, and for those of us in Canada, we take federalism for granted. That you kind of understand that there are, even if sometimes the lines get a bit blurred, there are different levels of government that have popular sovereignty, that aren't just subservient to another level of government, but they're elected. They make their own decisions. The concept of federalism is, I think can be deployed very effectively to help solve tensions and conflicts. It doesn't have to be a sort of a binary. You're either totally subject to a central government or you're independent, but rather you can have this structure that has accommodated difference in Canada and can accommodate difference in other places. Tell us a bit about the journey in Burma towards recognizing the importance of federalism, to what extent you're looking at other countries, and how might federalism work kind of post-Civil War?
Yeah, that's a very fundamental thing, is that when we got the independence from the British, and then the ethnic nationalities and the Burma majority led by General Aung San, and the different ethnic leaders signed that we call it Panglong Agreement, that's signed in the Chan State and the Panglong town. That's a federalism that we all agree to practice, and that we all agree to live in the union, and then that's the foundation of our country gain the independence. But since the military used since the federalism as an excuse that disintegration of the country, then they staged a coup, General Neville staged a coup, that given the federalism as an excuse. But federalism is about our country is more united. Yes, there will be some independence and self-determination for the states according to the constitutions, and that's why that as I mentioned, we have um, diverse communities, diverse states and regions, and then that's why the federalism is the only way that we will be able to build a stable, peaceful, prosperous countries that everybody agrees. That's the people of Burma, will of the people of Burma, regardless of the ethnic background, religious backgrounds. And, and then that's federal democracy charter is the foundation that we agree. And then based on that, we are working towards a transitional constitution and then real federalism. So again, we use that federal units. And the federal units, we have to define the federal units, how we're going to build a country. Now we started using the resource sharing. And in our control areas, we have natural resources, and also that we have taxation system. We started using the resource sharing model in the different regions, and how much the tax money goes to the central government, how much in the regional governments and the local governments. That I would say that about 70% go to the region and local, about 30% goes to the central government. And that's why I'm saying that we are starting the federalism in action as we're fighting against a authoritarian military junta. So,
Yeah.
and then also that a lot of people in the West, or not only West but also in the region, they give the excuse that only the army is only the strong institution. If army fall, the country will be the fragmented, like a balkanization that some people use. No, because this is the one that we all united. Nobody wants to leave the union. Everybody committed to live in a union. Yes, there will be the debates. Now, how are we going to do the resource sharing, for example? And how are we going to build the federal units? And yes, those are the healthy discussion, healthy debates, peaceful debates will happen. And in Canada, with ongoing happening in Parliament, as we all know. But one most important thing is that nobody declare that they want to be independent. Everybody say that they want to live in the federalism, federal democratic union. Okay, yeah, we still defining the transitional arrangements. We're working towards we are gaining, we progressing, and we are ready for that military downfall and to build a better life and a peaceful, stable, democratic union, and that will help also the regional stability, regional security. Because as I mentioned, millions of people went outside of the country, refugees. And then under this military junta, there are the scam, internet online scam, and the billions, I think US in IP estimated multi-billion, even said the 10 or $20 billion operations. So that scam affect not only Burma or regions, but also reach to the countries, even like in the United States or in Canada, because a lot of narcotics coming off from our country. So that's affect a country like as far as like Canada or United States. So that they are threatening not only the Burma, but also region and the global security as well. So that's
Yeah.
very important that we need to build that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned in the context of federalism, everybody is committed to the union. Of course, our experience in Canada shows that you can even have people that are separatists that aren't committed to the
Mhm.
idea of the union, still being part of our democratic federalism, provided that they're committed to resolving differences peacefully. our system even can absorb that kind of uh,
Yeah.
position, which I think is, it's surprising to people around the world who would in some cases really view any kind of separatist discourse as illegitimate. Whereas in Canada, of course, I disagree with it. I support Canada remaining Canada, but I sit with and work with people in Parliament who have a different position, who by their presence accept the legitimacy of the system and the process, even if they have a different opinion. So, but look, it's taken a long time getting to that point, right? It wasn't,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. And
yeah.
even in Canada, they're still working on that federalism to be
Yes, they
perfect,
were
right?
exactly,
Still a long way to go, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. No, and as an Albertan, I would certainly say our federalism is not perfect, but it's but having a federal system where we can
Exactly.
be part of Canada and preserve our own powers and distinctiveness is
Exactly.
important.
Like in Alberta, in Burma, well, we have an oil-rich region, right? They will be talking about that, how they will be arguing how much will be controlled by the state or the
Yeah,
central government. And then also
yeah,
people may not know that we are the major producer of the rare earths in the global major supplier.
yeah,
But unfortunately, the previous military regime did that with the exporting to the China. Well, they don't have the environmental standards and so on and so forth. And the China's sold it to exported to different countries. That actually that those rare earth now is those rare earth control regions now controlled by the resistance forces. But
yeah,
of course, there was no production at this time because of the war is still going on. But
yeah,
those things will like the federalism and then whoever controls that state may say that
right,
okay, yeah, resource sharing. Let's talk about that. No,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's the healthy discussions, and that will
exactly.
build our more stronger union, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And look, you started talking about the strategic importance of Burma, and let's come back to that as we wrap up here. Um, yeah, very important mineral resources, strategic location. South China Sea, China, India, um, and a central location within the Indo-Pacific. Russia has been a key enabler of the military junta. China's obviously active and present. You share a border with a major power, India. Um, uh, what do you see as being the agendas of these different players, and how that fits into this kind of global strategic competition that we're seeing among the different players, democratic and authoritarian?
Yeah. And you already reiterate about the importance of the geopolitics and strategic location, and then Russia is a number one supporter of the military regime, openly, and only the only country that recognize openly to the military junta, and the military chief may online that he is a terrorist actually killing the people. Uh, the only the Russia invited him to visit, and then Russian supply like Su-30 fighter jets, Mi-35 attack helicopters. They're using against the civilians and the drones. And then in turns, only a few people knows that Burmese military factories produce the artillery shells that re-exported to the Russia. So the Russian are using those shells in Ukraine. So that's how that global security could be threatened by this regime, even though not directly through the Russia in Europe, and then also that we are uh, the coexisting with the major regional powers like India, and then also the world superpower China. And China wants to keep that border security and stability. And China's pushing, and a lot of media reports saying about the China's pressuring to the resistance forces not to stop or not to take the future offensive against the military because they want the peace in our country. But our people need to know the will of our people of Burma. That our people will not rest, and that our people will continue fighting until this military junta fall, and until we replace a brutal authoritarian system with the federal democratic union that will benefit to all the neighbors and even to the global. And also like recently, May Online, the chief of the military who led the stage as a coup. Until recently, May Online was no countries invited him to visit, and then recently that China invited him to attend that Mekong sub-region summit.
Mm.
That's five countries: China, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. So he went to China, the Kunming in Yunnan State, and he attended, and so that is and now we mentioned to our neighbors that the we want to live the peaceful coexistence, and then with that mutual respect, and then respect the will of the people. And the
Mhm.
China's we want to keep we we are the people that who doesn't want the war. We want the peaceful, stable country and the
Yeah.
prosperity of our people. And China also wants to have the same. And but those goals of the destroying by the military, instability, violence, and then also destroying the economy. That's the military junta is doing that. So the all neighboring country, China, India, Bangladesh, Thailand, they should stand together with the people of Burma and respect the will of the people of Burma. And this way uh, that we can also in terms of we can also have the regional stability and some prosperity of the region. And then also that China, a lot of people, not a lot of people, so some pandits and observers saying that China believes that NUG and allies are pro-West, pro-Western, pro-American, and that that's why they don't. China doesn't want American to be at the doorsteps of their next door neighbor. And but we not pro anyone. We not pro West. We not pro East. We practicing the independent the foreign policy like other many other countries, and then but
Mhm.
we will engage with all friendly nations that who helping us and then providing the humanitarian assistance and so on. So we want to also maintain that the productive friendly relationship with all our neighbors, China, India,
Yeah.
Bangladesh, and
Yeah.
Thailand and Laos. So that's
You
but
yeah.
yes.
You want to have good relations with everybody. The model you're pursuing is that of a federal multi-party democracy, which institutionally would certainly look a lot more like countries in the West. But I
The
understand,
West.
you'd want to have constructive relationships with all of your neighbors. But at the present time, it seems from what you're describing, certainly that that Russia is a kind of primary antagonist, and
Mhm.
that China has taken some steps. It sounds like that aren't helpful. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you know, um, but I guess the big question for us is what we in the West can do, and we've talked about sanctions, we've talked about using assets, we've talked about recognizing and collaborating with the NUG. We've talked about delivering humanitarian assistance in a cross border way, and uh, certainly these are some things that would help you do the political and the military work you're trying to do in order to liberate your country. So I'll give the last word to you, Zaw, before we wrap up here. Thank you again. Anything else you want to say? Anything we've missed? Any final words for our listeners?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you, Gardner, for inviting me to participate in this podcast. And then also that I want to thank Canada the Canadian government and the Canadian people who supported us, and then like you mentioned that putting pressure on the Canadian government putting pressure on the military junta by imposing sanctions, and then providing the humanitarian assistance with the Canadian taxpayer money. And then that's why that I want to thank Canada for that. But one thing that we want to mention is the sanctions. Sanctions is good, and also that we need to have a enforcement mechanism to be effective with those sanctions. And then on the
Yeah.
humanitarian assistance, like I just want to reiterate what we've discussed a few times in this conversation, and it's the direct assistance, humanitarian assistance to the people in needs in our control, resistant control or pro-democracy movement controls areas. That would be very much appreciated, and the work where will be very wisely used, effectively use the taxpayer money. And then also that civilian protection, very important. Civilian protection that Canada could provide the early warning system, and then also the communication equipment. And also we are the one of the most the landmine countries, and even the demining assistance and technical assistance, and then also that we need we need that technical and financial assistance as well for the demining. Thus, a lot of people die daily from the mine. And on top of that, the recognition to the national unity government, because right now that we control the most of the territories, along with the resistance forces. So this will help providing that humanitarian assistance more effectively. So this is a time that Canada and the free world and the democratic countries and all neighbors as well that should recognize the national unity government, and at least our friendlier nations like Canada and U.S. should be leading this way, and also that working with ASEAN regional bloc that to be not just supporting but also being the active player in ASEAN Plus model to help the people of Burma to find a way to come up from this political humanitarian crisis. That's how the Canada can do that more effectively. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks again for joining us. I hope this has been an informative hour or so for everybody watching and listening. It has been for me, and we've been working on this for a long time, and I've still learned a lot of things in our conversation. So thank you, and thank you for the important work that the NUG is doing. It's as you described, challenging and very important work for the security of your country, but also the security of the world. So.
Thank you.
I hope everybody enjoyed this episode of Resuming Debate. We come out with new episodes about every 2 weeks, and we cover the full gamut of topics. Sometimes we're talking about ArriveCan and domestic corruption scandal issues, all the way to these global peace and security issues. So leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, and stay tuned for another episode of Resuming Debate in 14 days.